president did not declare state of emergency in Rivers State. The president declared a martial law in Rivers State. And I want you to understand the difference. The state of emergency is recognized by our constitution and has given the president the power to declare state of emergency under certain conditions. The Nigerian Bar Association, led by its president, has made it clear that none of those conditions has been fulfilled to warrant the declaration of state of emergency, meaning that the purported declaration is not a state of emergency. The Supreme Court is very clear. In the case of Attorney General of Bendel State and Adeyo, he said any act of governance not covered under an enabling law is a nullity. So there is nothing like state of emergency in what President Bola Ahmed Tinubu did. Why? Because state of emergency does not, even if the situation has arisen, does not include the removal of elected representatives of the people. The Constitution is very clear in section 1 subsection 2 that Nigeria shall not be governed or any part thereof by any persons except in accordance with the Constitution. Where is it in the Constitution where it was stated that Nigeria or any state should be governed by a sole administrator? None. So what the president did is akin to what the president of South Korea did when he declared martial law and wanted to remove the elected representatives of the people. The legislature moved in immediately, including the members of the party of the president, and removed the president himself for declaring martial law and intending to remove elected representatives of the people. That is a coup against the federation. The president of South Korea is awaiting trial for doing that, even in his own party. So what the legislature is expected to be thinking about doing is removing Tinubu for declaring a martial law on a state, a federating unit, and trying to rule that state, to rule the military through sole administrator, not contemplated by our constitution. So what Tinubu has done, can't you see? And let me explain them more. He usurped even the power to make law for that state. He said the sole administrator can make regulation. Regulation is part of law, because regulation is a subsidiary legislation that derives its validity from a statute. So he usurped it through a decree, not our law, that the sole administrator can make law, and that he, Tinubu, and his cabinet will be the one to authorize the law, usurping the power of the legislature. That is treason. That is trying to govern Nigeria, or a part of it, in a manner not contemplated by the constitution. Now, Tinubu suspended numerous sections of the constitution in order to make his declaration. No state of emergency authorizes the government to suspend any provision of the constitution. But in declaring the martial law, which Tinubu did for Rivers State, he suspended section 1 of the constitution, section 179, 180, 188, 189, and section 120 and 121, including section 117 and 110, in other words 110 of the constitution. He suspended these several sections of the constitution in order to make that declaration. That cannot be declaration of a state of emergency. What are these constitutions, provisions of the constitution talking? You cannot govern Nigeria outside elected member of the representatives of the people. That is what these sections are saying. And these sections enumerated the methods that you can use to remove a member of the House of Assembly or the governor. 1, by death, by resignation, by removal through impeachment, by permanent incapacity and expiration of term, and for the House of Assembly member by recall. That is the summary of all these sections that I have enumerated. So the president suspended these sections and wanted to rule Rivers State by decree, because he has already usurped the power of the legislature. And that is why I'm saying that what he declared was martial law, was a coup against the people of Rivers State. Rivers State are the ones that elected the governor and the members of the House of Assembly, and even by interpretation act, he said he that appoints is the only person that have the power to remove. So the president did not appoint the governor, he did not appoint the members of the House of Assembly, they were elected. So the president has no right to remove them. And any government in place in a democracy was instituted by laws. And that is why the Supreme Court say any act of governance that is not covered under an enabling law is a nullity. Even the National Assembly that has the right, and I'm talking now about the state of emergency, for you to know the difference from the state of emergency and what Tinubu did. In the state of emergency, Section 305 was clear. You declare state of emergency when there is war, or when there is imminent threat of invasion of Nigeria. That has not happened. Or when there is actual breakdown of public order and public safety as to warrant extraordinary measure to correct the situation, or where there is a danger that such a thing will happen, or where there is a natural calamity of such that needs extraordinary measure to correct, or where there is a threat to the collapse of the Federation of Nigeria. This is Section 305, subsection 3. Now, none of these things has happened, and the president came on TV to say there is a security report for you. Security reports, Mr. President, is for you. It is not for Nigerians. So anything that Nigerians do not know should not know Nigerians. You that know your security report, the security report has not given you the right to remove elected representatives. So what the state of emergency actually is doing is that the president should empower the democratic forces to be able to overcome the danger, even if it means using extraordinary measures. What is the extraordinary measures? The state of emergency that is talking about an extraordinary measure is that you have the right to restrict the fundamental human rights of Nigerians when you are taking away the extraordinary measure. It does not mean removing elected representatives, and this was stated in Section 45 of the Constitution, when they say that the provisions of the human rights cannot invalidate any law made by the National Assembly if that law is intended for the defense, public safety, public morality, public order, or public health of the country. And even that section made it clear that the National Assembly has the power to make such law for the defense, even if it affects the fundamental human rights. And in Section 11, subsection 4, the Constitution made it clear that the making of the law by the National Assembly does not include the removal of the governor or the deputy. That is, even if the legislature is not functioning in that state. What does that tell you? That no law gives any right to any elected president to remove the elected representatives of the people. Now, let me tell you this catch, because the president is referring to one pipeline or two that was breached during the regime of President Goodluck Jonathan. The whole pipelines in Niger Delta were threatened, most of them breached by the militants that have waged war against the Federal Republic because of the marginalization of the Niger Delta. President Goodluck Jonathan, bless his soul, that was a situation that needed a state of emergency. He did not even declare a state of emergency because he did not believe that there was anything extraordinary in what these people are doing, which the security forces cannot contain. He simply made an order that the security forces should restore order in that region and arrest the culprits and bring them to justice. This was what he did. And the security forces moved in. No governor was affected, no House of Assembly was affected, and it led to the dialogue, which resulted in the amnesty, which brought peace to the region, which we are enjoying today. When a competent president wants to make peace in any part of the country, he goes it by the way that President Goodluck Jonathan, that President Umaru Yar'Adua went about it. You negotiate, you go into dialogue, not going to support your appointee in order to destroy the state because you want to capture the state. That is why it is not a state of emergency that he's doing, because Yar'Adua, faced with the problem in the entire Niger Delta, which breached all the pipelines, which brought war against the Federal Republic, did not even declare a state of emergency. And the president is telling you apprehension, there is tension, not that is anything actual, no evidence. So that is one. Secondly, when Goodluck Jonathan was faced with invasion, insurgency by a terrorist group called Boko Haram that has taken over local governments, and 3 states were under threat, Goodluck Jonathan rightly declared a state of emergency and did not remove any governor, did not remove any elected representative of the people. Why? Because he was not declaring martial law, he was declaring state of emergency. And he took out that situation. I remember when Boko Haram, before the election, in 6 weeks, he wiped them out. Why he declared the state of emergency is to let the people know your movement might be curtailed. So don't come and quote for us freedom of movement. You should not come out in so time because stray bullets can catch you. And then if stray bullet catches anybody, you can't go to court and say the person was killed. That is the essence of the state of emergency. Your fundamental human rights could be involved. Now let's go to Obasanjo, because Obasanjo was the only leader that removed some governors during the declaring state of emergency, which of course the courts now have ruled illegal. But one thing Obasanjo did, he did not use it as an instrument of power grab. Obasanjo never declared or removed any elected representative in the opposition party. It was only PDP members, his own party, that he removed. And there was another governor that had the same security problem in another party. Obasanjo refused to remove him because he knew that it would be interpreted as power grab. Obasanjo wrote a letter of warning to that governor. When Tinubu was governor, there was security problems in Lagos. Obasanjo restrained himself from declaring state of emergency in Lagos. I still remember it was Dele Alake that came out on TV and told Obasanjo, the security in Nigeria is your duty, not the duty of Tinubu in Lagos. And that if security had failed in Lagos, it is your failure, not the failure of Governor Tinubu. And you cannot declare a state of emergency in Lagos because of security failures. Because security is the exclusive reserve of the federal government. Because all the instruments and apparatus of the armed forces is commanded by the federal government. The state has no power because they don't have any police. And Dele Alake made it plain to Obasanjo. When I met Dele Alake, when we were in APC, in one function, I went to him and said, Dele, remember that thing you did during Tinubu's regime? You confronted Obasanjo and told Obasanjo you cannot declare a state of emergency in Lagos. Dele said, yes. We talked about it. I said, Dele, you did the right thing. And I congratulated him. He is there today. He told me that, look, they had to do it. And they did it. And Obasanjo did not declare state of emergency in Lagos. Not because there was no tension. There was even times in Lagos when Alaipo will kill a soldier or wound a soldier without knowing. Soldiers will go and wipe them out. During Tinubu's regime, nobody declared state of emergency. And now in Rivers State, nobody has died as a result of anything. And you came out on TV and say you're declaring a state of emergency. No, it's not a state of emergency. It is a declaration of martial law. It is a coup to forcefully and with the military remove elected representatives so that you will take over the state and administer it with military people. That's a coup. Now, let me come in again, because when they talk about this state of emergency or removing governor, Tinubu is the first president since 1979 that has used the instrument of state of emergency to usurp power from the opposition party till date. That is why it's a power grab. There was nothing in Rivers State that necessitated the declaration of a state of emergency. Let me give you another example, because they are talking about pipeline being breached, this and that. When they organized the local government election in Rivers State, secretariats were burned by people who were against the governor. Somebody was caught with a bomb. He detonated it, he wounded him. They traced him, they knew him, they arrested him. What has happened to him? To date, nothing. People went arsonists who were loyal to the appointees of the president, burnt down the secretariats in open glare. Nobody was arrested. Why? No state of emergency was declared. Why? And then now you have peace. You're saying you are declaring a state of emergency. I was really troubled when the president was mentioning Supreme Court judgment. The Supreme Court judgment said that Appropriation Act must be submitted by the governor. Resubmitted, not submitted, because the governor has submitted it into a legitimate House of Assembly, and they were legitimate until the declaration of the Supreme Court. Now they said he should represent it to the 27 lawmakers, and the law is that no money of the state can be spent except it is appropriated by the House of Assembly, and that the governor will present it for such appropriation, and it will be embedded in an appropriation bill, which will become law if passed. That's why I say that Tinubu suspended section 120 and section 121, because he wants to destroy the same Supreme Court judgment which has given a final judgment on the issue that the governor should represent the Appropriation Act. This declaration is against the Supreme Court judgment, and it is now Tinubu that is disobeying the Supreme Court judgment, not the governor of Rivers State. The governor of Rivers State he wrote to them first, come, let us discuss about the budget. What a good man. Why is he inviting them? Because the budget that contained only 3 members of the House of Assembly will not be the same as the budget that will contain 27 members. So in his characteristic form, he said, come, let us sit down and discuss the issues that arose from Supreme Court judgment. They refused. They gave him ultimatum. Can you imagine? People who give ultimatum mean we are waiting for you and you must come and present this within this time. The governor, when they refused to come and see him, went to honor the ultimatum, and yet they locked the gate against him. And yet Tinubu is giving it as an example, and he's calling the governor. Which governor? The governor that said he's going to obey everything about the Supreme Court judgment and has obeyed all, and you're still calling him. That means you have a sinister motive to overthrow this government by force, and that is exactly what he did, deploying the military, because that deployment is against the judgment of the Supreme Court, which is an impeachable offense for a president to move against the judgment of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is very clear. No money should be spent, and they even stopped the allocation to that state. So saying that you will unilaterally make a law to overrule the Supreme Court and give the money of Rivers people to a sole administrator who is not even from their state, who is not even elected by them, means that you want to use your power, which is military power, as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. You want to use the armed forces to steal the money of Rivers people and use it and give to your stooges, because there is no law that covers it. Like I said, the Supreme Court is clear. Any act of governance not covered under an enabling law is a nullity. So Tinubu is trying to breach the Supreme Court's judgment. Tinubu is trying to usurp the power of the National Assembly to make law. Tinubu is the executive. So Tinubu now wants to be the legislature, the judiciary, the executive in the issues of Rivers State. If this is not military dictatorship, if this is not a declaration of martial law, tell me what it is. Because rule of law means that government should do everything in accordance with the law. Which law has given Tinubu the rights to appoint a friend of his, or a stooge of his, or a loyalist of his, and overthrow the elected representative of Rivers people and use such people to govern Rivers State? So what happened in Rivers State is a coup, and Nigerians must rise against this. The president of South Korea, like I said, was removed and is facing trial for declaring a martial law upon the country. So Tinubu ought to be removed and ought to be facing trial for treason. This is the treason we're talking about, not arresting children who do not know anything about removing a government and saying you want to try them for treason. This is the actual treason, and this is what should happen. Elected people should be very careful what they do, because power is not forever. One day they will account for all the things they are doing. So what happened in Rivers State is a coup, and should be regarded as that. It's not a declaration of state of emergency, it's a declaration of martial law, whereby you remove elected representatives by force of arms, and then you install a leader, which is a sole administrator outside the democratic norms of the society.
You listen to that? Kenneth Okonkwo. Very good. Now Tinubu has successfully declared a coup in Rivers State and is getting away with it. And I still can't believe that he's going to get away with it for good 6 months. If he succeeded, 6 months, I promise you, it's going to go beyond 6 months. If possible, since Fulara is not coming back before the next election. If he does not come back before the next election, he shouldn't bother coming back to contest at all. Because there's no point. Where is the money? Where is the resources? Where is everything? There's not going to work. So, if I'm still shocked, like since yesterday or 2 days now, it's been problem. You declaring state of emergency. It's not, I said it before, it's not to solve the problems you think you have. It's to cause more problem. War. Any military, any state that is being governed by military, you know what you are likely to see. Isn't it? Anyways, nothing much to say. You heard it from Kenneth Okonkwo. Kenneth Okonkwo has said it all. So, Tinubu has succeeded. Okay, we are watching.